Well, I mean, so then the question is, Mick, where does this go from here? Obviously, the president has done just enough, I would say, in this press conference today, the big boy press conference, as they called it, to stay in the race, but he hardly hit it out of the park. What's going to happen at this Democrat convention, which is coming up? Because I'm hearing more reports of congresspeople urging Biden to step aside, money taps being turned off, and even delegates now being called to have their support checked by the Biden White House or people in the Biden camp. Is there any chance that there might be a shift or a movement at that convention?
James, the best guess I've got on that, again, talking to people as this press conference is going on, is that this wasn't bad enough to get him kicked out of the race. It's also not good enough to put all the concerns about him to bed, which means that the slow bleed that you've seen over the course of the last 12 days since the debate is going to continue. You ask about the Democrat convention. It's a fascinating question, but keep in mind the Republican convention is intervening and will begin on, I think, Monday in this country. And it's going to be fascinating to see how Donald Trump handles it, specifically as to his selection of a vice presidential candidate. He almost has to guess as to whether or not Biden will remain at the top of the ticket or whether or not the top of the ticket will be Kamala Harris or somebody else as he makes his vice presidential pick. Because face it, to be honest, you got to think that his pick for vice president would be different with a Biden-Harris team or a Harris-somebody other team or somebody else team. So it's a very difficult thing to do as a Republican, to try and anticipate who you're running against when there's no definitive answer coming out of this press conference. The slow bleed will continue. I don't think that Joe Biden will be able to proceed as the Democrat nominee, but if he wants to, he will.
Well, this is the thing that I find really interesting, is that there's an awful lot of people who've studied and watched Joe Biden for years and years, decades even, because he's been around basically forever, who say that stubbornness is the thing that defines his presidency, his entire political life. And if he likes being president, he doesn't care what people think. Is this the ego now getting in the way of, well, potentially even the security of the free world?
Yeah, well, a lot of that turns on whether or not that stubbornness is an inherited trait, because we're hearing, and I'm not making this up, that Hunter Biden has assumed a significant leadership role within the White House right now. So yeah, the team is advising him, seems to be his family. So is his wife Jill as stubborn as he is? Is Hunter inherited that stubbornness? If that's the case, those are probably the only people that can talk him out of running for president right now. Nancy Pelosi can't do it. Chuck Schumer can't do it. Barack Obama can't do it. Apparently George Clooney can't even do it. He's listening to his family. Be curious to see if that stubbornness goes beyond just him.
But this is like this crazy, almost sort of downfall situation here. It's the president, it's Jill, it's Hunter, all kind of bunkered down in the Oval Office. And then we've got this situation where even if the entire Democrat money machine turns off and everybody says, no, we've got to have Kamala Harris, God help us, or somebody else, well, there's really still nothing they can do to budge him, is it? It's just simply not possible.
That's right. Again, when I was having dinner with the Democrats this week, one of the things they made clear, and they wanted everybody to understand, is this is up to Joe Biden. He has the delegates necessary to become the Democrat nominee for president, period, end of story. That's not going to change unless he wants it to change. If he wants to be on that ballot in November and he's alive, he is going to be on that ballot. So this is all in his court. Nobody can take it away from. I guess there's one exception. Vice President Kamala Harris could make a motion under the 25th Amendment to have him declared incompetent right now for office, but I would never imagine that happening. Short of that, the ball is in Joe Biden's court.
Hey, look, we've talked a lot about the Bidens, but let's talk about the Trump family now for a second, because we had kind of a new hero emerged amongst the Republican Party this week. Have a look at this here.
A very young man. He's now going to college, got into every college he wanted to, and he made his choice. And he's a very good guy, I'll tell you.
I had a standing ovation for Trump's youngest son, Barron Trump. This was his first time at a campaign rally, and I saw people like Morgan Freeman on Twitter absolutely losing their mind that there could be a Trump dynasty here. Does this reveal some of the anger on Twitter and elsewhere, just how unhinged and deranged some of the people who are anti-Trump out there are?
Sure, they're beating up on an 18-year-old kid for going to his dad's political rally. Seriously, come on.
Yeah.
estrangement syndrome is not limited to Donald J. Trump. There's no question about that. It goes across the entire family. So it's hard to see. Look, he's a good kid. I didn't spend a lot of time with him because he was very young when I was in the White House with him. But the president thinks very, very highly of him, as he should. Good-looking kid. By the way, you couldn't see it, and you didn't get a perspective. I think he's like 6'6" or 6'7". So he's well over 2 meters tall in the strange way that you guys measure down there. But he's an 18-year-old kid going to his dad's political rally. What's wrong with that? So look, let Morgan Freeman be an old man yelling at clouds. That's fine. He's not the only one in the country doing that.
Yeah, how the mighty have fallen. Hey, before you go, Mick, I want to show you this clip of Donald Trump with Brian Kilmeade. Have a look at this.
On your vice president candidate, word is that you won't pick J.D. Vance because of his facial hair. Is that true?
No,
facial hair
I've never heard that one. Like a young Abraham Lincoln.
Right, he's a handsome man. Doug Burgum,
he's a nice guy.
On abortion in North Dakota, he signed something legislation handed him. Does that hurt him?
It's an issue.
And lastly, Marco Rubio.
Everything's an issue.
Marco Rubio and being from Florida, would that stop you from picking him?
No, but it does make it more complicated. You do that, and it makes it more complicated. There are people that don't have that complication.
So just to come back to that question of the VP pick, there was a few names thrown out there. You got the reactions. We've spoken about some of your thoughts in the past. Who are you sticking with here? Who do you reckon it's going to be?
What I'm hearing, I'll give you two answers to that question. What I'm hearing is that J.D. Vance is moved to the top of the list. And I think that makes some sense. There was a lot of discussion about his facial hair. But as soon as Donald Trump says you look like a young Abraham Lincoln, that means you look like you're from Central Casting, and he loves people who look the part. So J.D. certainly could be on the short part of the list. I don't think Doug Burgum is going to make the final cut. The two names that I will give out, one you've heard from me before, and one we haven't talked about in a while. I still think Ben Carson is in consideration, the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the first Trump administration. And a name we haven't talked about in a while, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. Why is that? I think if the Trump team believes that Kamala Harris is going to be the top of the Democrat ticket, they believe they're going to need a woman as a vice president. And I think Kristi Noem goes back on the list. A list she was on, by the way, for a long time until she had that blow up about shooting her dog. But I think she might have rehabilitated herself to the point where she could be back on the list. We'll know in the next 72 hours or so.
Well, the U.S. Report is a great lover of dogs, so I think we are not on the Kristi Noem bandwagon. But Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for your time, for joining us here on the U.S. Report.